Um, so this afternoon, we are doing a webinar on celebrating language culture in primary schools, and we're very lucky this afternoon to have our guest speaker, Ellie, who's going to be talking us through how she's done it in her school to a very high standard, and you may find a lot of what's useful here. You might find that you've got loads of questions as well. So we've built in a little bit of time at the end today to ask some questions, and also get as much out of Ellie as you can in terms of any answers that you would like answering. And there you can see Ellie's just put her bio up there. You can read through what she's actually done at her school in Leicester. And obviously Ellie's quite heavily involved with the ELL. As we sort of worked quite a lot with them, one of their corporate sponsors. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Ellie, who I'm sure will give us a really good idea about how she's developed languages in her school. Okay, Ellie, over to you.
Hi everybody, good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you can all hear me. I'm assuming if I don't hear anything from you, Elaine, that all is well. You can see what's on the screen and you can hear me perfectly. So thank you all for being here this afternoon. My name is Ellie, as Elaine has just said. I am a qualified primary school teacher, but I also have a degree in French and Hispanic studies, and I'm the Languages and International Lead at Hazel Community Primary School in Leicester, amongst other things. So I teach in Year 6, and I also teach French to all of Key Stage 2, and I also run extracurricular Spanish as well. So a lot of what I do at my school has to do with languages, it has to do with international partnerships, it has to do with promoting language learning across the school, both in terms of the French and the Spanish, but also the community languages that we have at Hazel, because we are a very multilingual, diverse community as well, which is fantastic. I also run the Association for Language Learning Leicester Primary Hub. If anybody's in the area and wants to join, please feel free to get in touch. And I also blog and tweet a lot about language learning. So today's aims really are the following. So to think a little bit about how language lessons can support with the building of so-called cultural capital, and we'll explore a little bit about what that might mean in a moment. We're going to have a look at the kind of dates that we might celebrate in school to expose children to the culture of different countries. So the countries of the target language that you're teaching, but also potentially as well the countries that they come from, or that that children in the school community come from. And we're going to look at how we can adapt our units of work and our planning to make sure that children are exposed to the culture of the target language country or countries, and how that doesn't just mean exposing children to the culture of France or Spain, but actually thinking about how we can take a step towards a more decolonised curriculum offer by looking a little bit further afield. And we're also going to talk about how we can make that more cross-curricular and involve the whole school community. And there will be some signposting of cultural resources and places that you might want to go to find out more information as I go through. So when we're talking about the foundations of language learning, or the pillars of language learning, or whatever we call it, there's lots of different ways of speaking about it. We're talking about phonics, and we're talking about vocabulary, and we're talking about grammar. So those are our three foundations on which we build everything that we do in language learning: speaking, listening, reading and writing. But I would also argue that culture should be in there as well as one of our pillars, because really, if we're thinking about it, how far would we get with communication in the target language if we don't have an understanding of the culture of that country? If our vocabulary and our phonics and our grammar are amazing, but we forget that, or we don't know that in France, if we don't say bonjour when we come into a shop, then we're going to be perceived as really rude and we're not going to get the service that we want. How useful is that learning really? So I think culture is really, really important, and there's only so far that phonics and vocabulary and grammar can get you before you might run into problems if you don't have an awareness of culture as well. So we talk a lot in schools about this idea of cultural capital, which is an idea that was coined really by Pierre Bourdieu in the 1970s and 1980s. And he called it the essential knowledge that pupils need to be educated citizens, introducing them to the best that has been thought and said, and helping to engender an appreciation of human creativity and achievement. That's not what he said, sorry, that's what Ofsted said. So he defined it basically as a way to explain educational inequality between children from different backgrounds. And Ofsted, as I've just said, talked about it being introducing children to the best that has been said and thought, etc., in human society. And we can have a lot of debate around what that actually means. And Amanda Spielman I tried to define it a little bit more, because it's quite a woolly phrase really, as the essential knowledge and standard reference points that we want children to have. And again, I think there's lots of issues around this idea of standard reference points. I mean, what is a standard reference point? No two people are going to have the same, and our biases are going to impact on that, etc. But what we need to be really careful about is that we need to remember that all children arrive at school with cultural capital. It might not be valued by the system that we find ourselves in, but they do bring it with them. And in multicultural and multilingual schools like mine, pupils really arrive bringing with them a real wealth of cultural capital, which needs to be valued and made visible and celebrated. So when we're thinking about celebrating languages in the primary classroom, one of the main things that we do at Hazel is to show a real celebration of our community languages. And we do that in various different ways. But one of the main ways that we do that is through what we might call European Day of Languages, which happens in September. We've actually renamed it Day of Languages because I think it's a little bit more inclusive for our children who speak non-European languages. And we really make a big fuss, if you like, about the fact that we have such an amazing, diverse and multicultural, multilingual community. And we spend a day celebrating the children's languages and the languages of their home backgrounds. We invite parents and carers into school, and they come and they share their languages. Some of them are fabulous and so brave, and they come and do a 30-minute lesson with the children in their language. Some of them come and read stories. Some of them just come and support in the classroom and maybe talk a little bit about the language that they speak at home. But it's a really, really nice way to celebrate the languages that the children speak. And the children share their home languages with their classmates. And they might teach them some words, and or the class might make posters or things with hello in different languages or whatever. There's hundreds and hundreds of different activities that you can do. And we also like to involve outside agencies. So the Confucius Institute are based very often at universities around the country. We're very lucky we have a Confucius Institute at De Montfort University, and they come in and they share a little bit about Chinese culture, and they share some information about calligraphy. The children do some calligraphy, and they do fan dancing and things like that. And we have members of staff sharing elements of their heritage. We have members of staff teaching Bhangra dancing, for example, or sharing their languages. So it's a really nice way for the whole school community to come together and celebrate not just the fact that we learn French, which is the language that we learn in school, but also we celebrate our home languages as well. And we also do that at Christmas, when we celebrate Christmas around the world, where each class chooses a country, usually a country where they've got several representatives in their class from that nation, and then they learn about the Christmas celebrations in that country, including learning songs in those languages and performing them at a performance at the just before the Christmas holidays. So for me, I think it's really important to think about how we celebrate not just our languages that we're learning in school, but also how we celebrate our wider school community as well. Now, of course, when we're thinking about cultural capital in particular, I mean, as language teachers or teachers involved in the teaching of languages, we're really ideally placed to build children's cultural capital and their knowledge and understanding of the wider world, because naturally the children are going to be looking outwards, they're going to be looking at other countries, they're going to be learning about different ways of seeing the world. But I think it's really important that we need to be aware of our own personal bias when we're talking about cultural capital. And a really nice example of this that I like to show colleagues is the map of the world, but it's a Chinese map of the world. So China the characters for China in Mandarin are in fact actually mean Middle Kingdom. So here we can see that China is right at the middle of the map, and it's not a map that we would naturally recognise necessarily from our point of view as people living in Europe and seeing a more Eurocentric view of the world. So I think we just need to be really careful about how our worldviews may differ from others depending on where we live and how we were educated, etc. And when we're thinking about languages and cultural capital, we need to reflect the global nature of languages, particularly the global nature of languages that we're teaching. So when we're teaching Spanish, we don't just want to be thinking about Spain, we want to be thinking about the whole of the Spanish-speaking world. And that sort of leads into our decolonising the curriculum element, which I will discuss a little bit later on. If you do have an interest in decolonising the curriculum and thinking about how we can make language learning less Eurocentric, then the Association for Language Learning has just founded a special interest group, which I am running alongside two fantastic colleagues, Darnell and Amy, and we will be meeting via Zoom, I believe, on Tuesday the 13th of June, so this time next week at 4:30. So if you are interested in that, please check out the Association for Language Learning website, or you can look on my Twitter, which is at ECCMFL, and all of the information will be on there. So please feel free to join if you are really interested in kind of thinking about how we can make languages more inclusive and more reflective of the global element of language learning. So when we first started, or when I first started at Hazel as the French specialist, which was about 4 or 5 years ago now, I really wanted to start thinking about how we can celebrate culture in the school. And at that time, I was quite new to the role, and I didn't feel amazingly confident with kind of fiddling around with the planning too much. But I did think, well, you know what we can do? We can have a few days, we can do some events to kind of raise the profile of French in the school, and we can have a look at how we can make sure that French is really something that children feel excited about, and that the French culture is something that they feel immersed in and they feel that they can engage with. So we simply started off looking at Le 14 Juillet, which we still celebrate in school in the last week of the summer term. And we have a French cafe, which is staffed by Year 6 waiters. I have to apologise. I've had to cover all of the faces, so I'm sorry that we've got all these little yellow faces dotted all over the place. But just to protect the privacy of the children, I've had to put those there. So we have our French cafe, which is staffed by Year 6 waiters. And if you are interested in running a French cafe, it's really a really good idea to contact your community champion at your local supermarket, because they are able usually to get you things for free, which we all love in schools. And I've managed to get croissant, pain au chocolat, orange juice, all that sort of stuff from them for free, which is brilliant and part of their outreach work. And all we have to do basically is to send them a thank you note at the end to thank them for providing us with that. We do cheese tasting, which is always interesting. We have a pétanque tournament on the playground, so the children go out and play in teams. And we have art activities. We have a really great one which is inspired by Ben Ayn, who's a Belgian artist. And it's a really nice opportunity, and this is what we're going to be doing this year, to invite secondary colleagues, because we know that transition is a really tricky thing, and it's very, very difficult to make those links, and I'm still trying with my local secondaries. But this can be a nice opportunity at the end of term when everybody has perhaps a little bit of breathing space to invite them in to come and see the sorts of things that the children are doing in French or in Spanish or German or whatever at your school. So this is a really nice celebration that we always do at the end of the academic year and works really well. And there are lots and lots of other potential dates that we could celebrate. Dia de los Muertos, for Mexico, of course. We can think a bit about Christmas. Epiphany is a great one for the French and Spanish speakers, because we can do our king cake and do all that sort of stuff. April Fool's Day, Poisson d'Avril, and then we've got more localized festivals like La Tomatina, etc., which happens in the Valencia region in the last Wednesday in August, where people throw lots of tomatoes at each other. And we also have Las Fallas, of course, again in Valencia, where it was tons and tons of fireworks and really exciting sort of festival. So there's lots and lots of different days that we can celebrate. And Polyglot Languages has a really fantastic section with cultural calendars for French and Spanish and German. I've included the link below. And it's a way to kind of see, well, you know, I might have a bit more time in March. What could we do in March to celebrate something cultural to do with France or to do with Spain or to do with Germany? So a nice one to check out if you're not sure on the sorts of dates that you would like to celebrate. But a really nice way to kind of raise the profile across the school of languages and to really kind of get children excited about the cultural aspect of learning a language. So that's how I sort of started out, with just individual days dotted here and there, individual lessons to celebrate culture. And then over time, I started to think, well, I want, I think, a little bit more of a sustained approach. I want to kind of think about how I can incorporate culture more into my real lesson plans, really, and rather than doing one-off things here and there. And that's when I started to look at my long-term planning and think, how can I start to adapt this? Because we really need to be clever about how we use our language learning time, because we don't have much of it, so we need to use it in the best way that we can. And that's when I started to identify units of work where either there was already a cultural element and I could bring more of that out, or I could replace a particular unit with something more cultural but still cover very similar objectives and still cover the phonics and the vocabulary and the grammar that I wanted to cover, but perhaps look at it from a bit of a different angle. So in year 3, for example, we do a really lovely unit of work which is called Vive l'heure du goûter. It uses this fantastic book, which is quite wordy for year 3, to be honest, and they don't understand lots and lots of it. There's a lot of translation that needs to happen. But what it does, it introduces this concept to the children of le goûter, the snack that children have when they finish school. And it introduces some of the different foods. There's tons and tons of them in the book. When I introduce them, I only do about 6 because I think, you know, that's enough for children in year 3. So I introduce these snack items, le pain au chocolat, le croissant, la barquette, etc. We introduce that through phonics. I use a lot of Sue Cave's physical French phonics resources for that, but there's lots and lots of different places that you can go to find phonics resources. And the children then begin to learn that vocabulary. And then once they've learnt that new vocabulary, and we talk through masculine and feminine, which is really important for the children to be introduced to early on, I think, to kind of get an understanding of that. And then we start thinking about positive and negative sentence types. So we're bringing in that grammar as well. So they're using opinion sentences to talk about things that they like and things that they don't like. And we do lots and lots of speaking and listening and reading around that before the children get a chance then to taste the different items. And then finally they write down their write a little mini book, actually, which talks about the things that they like tasting and the things that they didn't like the taste of. And it's quite interesting because I think all of the things are really tasty, but quite often there's quite a few things that they're a bit like, no, not really sure about that. So we've got the phonics element, we've got the vocabulary building element, we've got the grammar element as well, with the masculine and feminine, the positive and negative, but we've introduced it all through this concept of culture. So we've still covered everything that we need to cover, but we've then got that that cultural element as well. In year 4, we start thinking about Henri Matisse. Now, this is a really nice unit of work because it actually links in with what the children are doing in their art learning as well. So we're kind of bringing together the art learning and the languages learning. In fact, they learn about Henri Matisse slightly earlier on in the term, so they already have that understanding of Matisse in terms of the cultural and the artistic aspect, and then I bring in the language element as well. And all of the work that they do is inspired by this fabulous découpé work of art by Matisse, which is called The Snail. So the children learn the names of lots of different shapes, and what's really brilliant with the shapes is, of course, that there's lots of cognates there, so we can revisit this idea of cognates, how they can help us as linguists when we're starting to learn a language. And then we do recapping of colours, which we've already done in year 3, and we use that then to describe the shapes that we've got, the different colours of the shapes, and that of course brings in our adjective and noun order. At this point, I will only use masculine shapes because I don't do any sort of agreement at this point in year 4. And then the children create their own animal, but they create their own animal in the style of Henri Matisse, using different shapes, arranging different shapes in different configurations. And then they can describe in writing what their animal is, and where the different shapes are, or what the different coloured shapes are, or what shapes they've used, depending on how confident they're feeling. And as I've said, it's a really nice way to kind of bring together the cultural aspect of this iconic artist alongside the grammar and the vocabulary and the phonics, of course. So all of those things marrying together. When a few years ago I started to really think about bringing in culture, I was really keen, as I've mentioned before, to start thinking more about not just France and the sort of Eurocentric view of the French language, but actually to start thinking more about la francophonie and thinking about the wider French-speaking world, and not just thinking about where people speak French or where French is an official language, but also thinking about why that is. So in year 5, we start to think a little bit more about la francophonie. The children actually learn about la francophonie much earlier on. They learn about it from reception, actually, although they don't learn French, and you'll see why in a little while. So in year 5, they do a unit of work called On s'envole pour la francophonie, and they essentially learn all about various different French-speaking countries through reading a really simple text in French, loads and loads of cognates, lots and lots of information that they can easily understand. And then they start thinking about a country that they would like to visit, a francophone country that they would like to visit, and recapping weather, clothes, colours, all sorts of things. They then pack a suitcase, and they explain what they're going to pack in their suitcase and why, because they're traveling to these various different parts of the world. And so it kind of brings together lots and lots of previous topics that they've done, things about the weather, things about clothing, etc., and allows them to kind of bring those things together, but also explore areas of the French-speaking world. So that's something that kind of is starting to be woven more into the fabric of my planning. And finally, in year 5, we do On fait des courses. This is brand new this year. I haven't actually done this yet. I'm doing it in 3 weeks' time. But the children are going to be learning some really practical French that they can use if they decide to take themselves off to a French-speaking part of the world. They're going to be visiting a French market. So we're going to be creating a very small version of a French market on our school playground. And we're going to convert one of the classrooms into a plane. So the children are going to get onto the plane with their passport and arrive in France. And then they'll be working in groups to buy different items from the market using some pretend euros. They'll also have a challenge to send a postcard home. So they'll need to buy a postcard and buy a stamp, write their little postcard and put it into the post box. And then they'll get back onto the plane and go back to their classroom eventually. So with their shopping bag full of stuff. So it's kind of an opportunity, because we don't do a French trip anymore. We used to, but we don't, since COVID, we haven't run it. I think it's just an opportunity to give the children a really kind of hands-on, practical opportunity to explore a little bit of French culture in terms of the French market, and to really kind of use their French for practical purposes. So that's something that is happening in our school for the first time this year, and hopefully it's going to be very, very successful. But as with everything, when you try it for the first time, there's always a little bit of doubt as to whether it's going to be whether it's going to run the way you want it to run. But I'll get back to you on how it goes. And then by year 6, we are starting to think a little bit more again about la francophonie, and we have our links to a school in Senegal. So a lot of our French learning, or a lot of our units of work, actually reference that link to our school, our partner school in Senegal. So we do a lot of work on Dakar Fashion Week. So we start thinking, again, we're talking about clothes, we're talking about colours, we're talking about adjective noun agreement in the singular and the plural. But instead of just looking at, you know, any old random pictures of clothes, we actually look at pictures of Dakar Fashion Week, which is a really nice way to shine a light, I think, on the fact that, you know, we all know about Paris Fashion Week and Milan Fashion Week and London Fashion Week, but actually Dakar Fashion Week brings together all of these fabulous creators and designers from the African continent and showcasing everything that is amazing about the creativity of people who are living there. So the children look at pictures of models wearing clothes for Dakar Fashion Week, and eventually their final piece of work that they create is a description of certain different pictures that they can see, what the people are wearing, etc. And what's really nice about it from a cultural point of view is that not only are they learning recapping, revising the clothes that we might use on an everyday basis, une robe, un t-shirt, etc. They actually start thinking about some traditional West African garments, which they wouldn't ordinarily perhaps think about when talking about clothes, or at least some of them won't. Where in my school, actually lots of children are already really familiar with lots of these clothes because they themselves come from West Africa. So they also learn words like le boubou, which is kind of the robe that the gentleman and one of the ladies in the bottom right hand corner are wearing, and they learn the name for headscarf and moussour as well. So again, really culturally rich, as well as linguistically providing them with everything that they need as well. And we also do a unit of work where we talk about music and we bring back vocabulary of opinion. And this time, instead of just saying whether they like something or they don't like something, the children listen to the different musical instruments from West Africa, from Senegal again, and then they justify their opinion by giving a simple statement using adjectives. I like it because, I don't like it because, etc. So again, we could just learn about musical instruments, but actually we can bring in that cultural element from the Francophone world that I think makes that learning really rich, or enriches that learning for the children as well. So I've mentioned already that we have our link in Senegal. We actually have a link for every class in Key Stage 2, which has taken quite a long time for us to build up over time. Year 3, I've got a lovely link with a school in Guadeloupe in the Caribbean. And we have a link in Year 4 with Reunion Island and Chad together. So that's really exciting. And we actually had one of the teachers from Chad come and visit us. She was in the UK and she came to visit us this year, which was absolutely amazing and just fantastic, and really provided the children with that fantastic link and that fantastic way of seeing that here's a person that works at the school that we're communicating with. We have a link in Year 5 with Rwanda, and we have, as I said, a link in Year 6 with Senegal. And we exploit those links in different ways depending on the technological capabilities of the school that we're communicating with. For example, the school in Chad and the school in Reunion Island, we do communicate via letters and things like that. Whereas the school in Senegal, which is quite technologically savvy, we managed to do Zoom calls and things like that. So all of this, I think, is really kind of enriching the children's language learning experience. I have to add that I am very, very lucky, and I do have about 40 to 45 minutes every week, which is kind of ring-fenced as international time. So that means that I get to go to each class roughly every half term to spend time with them working on their link with their partner country. And that really helps because before I had that, I was spending a lot of time in French lessons, writing letters, etc., which wasn't necessarily sort of helping me to get through the curriculum particularly quickly. So I am very, very lucky to have that time. And I do really value that as something that that enriches the children's cultural understanding, but also means that we're not pulling away from what we have to do with them in terms of the phonics and the vocabulary and grammar in their French lessons as well. But it does really bring the language learning and culture to life. And if you are interested in creating links, unfortunately, e-twinning no longer exists for us in the UK at least, but Connecting Classrooms at the British Council and also the British Council Partner Finder tool, which you can get just by Googling online, are really, really helpful. Connecting Classrooms are really useful because they actually pair you up with the school abroad. Their links generally are in Africa, the Middle East and Asia. So it's not so helpful for those of us who are teaching Spanish because there aren't really those links in South America as yet. but it is quite helpful because they sort of hold your hand through the whole process and help you to find your partner abroad. The partner finder tool is really good, but quite tricky in the sense that it's a bit like online dating, I guess, in the sense that you kind of approach somebody and they might say, oh no, we don't really want a partner in the UK. You might also get requests from people who you don't particularly want to partner with because they're not in a part of the world that you want to focus on, for example. So it's a little bit trial and error, but we got our link in Chad in this way, and we got one other link. Oh yes, we made a link with another school in Nigeria, which doesn't come through the languages side, but we have managed to find partner schools in this way really successfully. So definitely one to have a go at if you're interested. And there are so many people signed up to that. And of course, any international work that you do, any linking with schools abroad, any activities that you do in terms of that will all enable your school to apply for the International School Award with the British Council. And there are various levels of accreditation. We have been given the full accreditation a couple of years ago. We need to apply next year, I think, or reapply next year. But even if you're just in the very, very early process of setting up those international links and starting to think a little bit more about how you want to make languages or raise a profile of languages in your school, then the lowest level, if you like, is the entry level is quite easy to get. And what's really nice about this, and how I've tried to use it a little bit in my school, is that it's really nice for head teachers. They really like to have things that they can put in the school foyer, little plaques, and they like to have certificates, and they like to have things that they can put on the school website and on their letters and things like that to say this is what we're doing in our school. And I think it's very helpful to use it as a way to really raise the profile of language learning and international work in the school, because you can say, well, we've got to do this if we want to get the International School Award, or if we do this, then we will be able to apply for this level of the International School Award. So it can be a really nice tool for kind of raising the profile as well, and that's definitely how I've seen it work within my school. So having spent quite a lot of time looking at individual days, individual celebrations of culture, and having looked at how I could adapt my planning, the next step for me was really to start thinking about how I could take French or language learning and culture across the curriculum. And I think that's something that I felt was really important, because I was kind of working in a little bubble as the specialist. The teachers weren't in the class with me when I was teaching French. So it was all sort of happening, but it wasn't really connecting, if you know what I mean. Not everybody knew what the children were doing in French. So I wanted to make it something that other members of staff were kind of invested in and drawn into as well. So a couple of years ago, with the wonderful art coordinator or art lead that we have at our school, we planned Francophone Art Week, which was where children learned about artists from across the French-speaking world. And it really was an opportunity to give the children an appreciation of other cultures where the target language is spoken. And we didn't just do it in Key Stage 2, we do it all the way from reception up to Year 6. So each year group focuses on an artist from the French-speaking world. So reception up to Year 2, they focus more on artists from France, Matisse, Rousseau, etc. But then, because we have our nice links in Year 3, 4, 5 and 6, we then started to think, well, could it be that we could use an artist from Guadeloupe as our inspiration in Year 3? And we started doing some research, and that's what we did. So now we have children in Year 3, 4, 5 and 6 learning about the life of an artist from the country that they are linked with, and learning about their art. And what's really great about that is that many of them are actually contemporary artists. They're still alive. So our Year 3 children, for example, actually got to speak to the artist that they were learning about via Zoom, and she was so generous and fantastic. And the children had lots of questions for her. She answered the questions in French, and I did some translation for them. But it was just a really lovely opportunity for the children to actually see the person that they were learning about, which isn't always the case when we're looking at dead French people. So that was really, really nice. And at the same time as doing all of that artwork, so we do it for a week, but we only do it in the afternoon, so it doesn't sort of impact on the English or the maths or anything. But in their French lessons during that week, the children then produce work based on their artist or based on the culture of that particular country. So for example, Year 5 produce a list poem about Rwanda using videos and pictures, etc., as inspiration. And Year 6, you can see, have written, they write as Suleiman Keita, so they write an autobiography, which allows them to recap lots and lots of things about my name is, I am however old, I was born, my birthday is, etc. I was born in Dakar. So it gives them an opportunity to recap lots and lots of that stuff that they're already doing in French lessons, but doing it from a different point of view and bringing in that culture as well. And we also commemorate, or I'm not going to say celebrate, because we sort of mark, if you like, La Semaine de la Francophonie. Now, I think it's really important to express that I don't think necessarily that La Francophonie is a great thing. I obviously don't think that colonization, etc., is a positive thing at all. But I think it is really important that we do recognise that French is spoken in many parts of the world, and we talk about why. And we do that through La Semaine de la Francophonie, which happens in March. The children again focus on various different French-speaking countries. For Key Stage 2, it's the countries that they have the links with. For reception, Year 1 and 2, it's countries that they may know something about. So, for example, Year 1's link or Year 1's country is Madagascar. So lots of the children know a little bit about Madagascar because they've seen the film, etc. So they sort of work through a geography and a history lens more than anything. So they will be working on different aspects of life in that country or the culture of that country, but through geography and history. So, for example, in Year 4, they learn about Reunion Island, but they actually learn about the impact that volcanoes have on people that live on Reunion Island. How do they use the land? What do they do because they have volcanoes on their island? How does that impact their way of life? Year 1, you can see here, are investigating the impact of deforestation in Madagascar, which is a really, really big issue. So it's looking at issues within those countries through a geography and a history lens, but it's also drawing the children's attention to the fact that these are French-speaking countries and the reasons for that, really, really importantly. So the final step for me really has been talking about culture cross-curricular, and that's been really, really important because I feel like it's sort of involved the whole school community. Every single teacher has been involved in some way or another, and it's kind of raised the profile of languages and culture within the school as a whole. So when I was doing lots of my planning, I found these books, which are scholastic books. I found these really, really helpful. And I didn't realise I was using the Senegal one for a while when I was planning my units of work on Senegal. I didn't realise how many other titles there were. But when I went through, I thought, gosh, there's so many here. French-speaking countries, Spanish-speaking countries. And they're really helpful if you don't really have much of an idea about what life is like in Venezuela or what life is like in Côte d'Ivoire. It's actually a really nice way to look at what are the key aspects of culture there, what is life like there, and kind of focus your thinking about how you might make your planning include some aspects of culture from those particular countries. So I found those books really, really helpful. And as with everything, I always like to just finish off by saying that there has been a lot of work on the international side of the curriculum done at Hazel by me and by the team that work here. And it's happened over a really quite a long period of time, 4 or 5 years. So things take time to build, things take time to be incorporated into the culture and into the calendar of the school. And I'm very, very lucky that I have a really supportive head who values what we do in terms of our French learning, values what we do in terms of our culture, and values that the multicultural aspect of our school community. So big things have happened here, but they've definitely happened from very, very small beginnings. So starting off from just thinking about introducing a little bit of work on Epiphany or introducing a French cafe or whatever, moving from those small sort of one-off things to a much more built up, if you like, sort of planned curriculum, if you like, over time. But I would always say start small and things will build over time. So I think that's me done talking now, and we will have a little bit of time, I think, for questions. So hopefully there are some questions in the chat. I will happily answer those now. If you've got any questions to add into the chat, feel free. I actually can't see the chat, Elaine, so I'm just wondering if you might be able to read out any questions that are in there for me.
Yeah, I can.
Yep, I'm happy to do that if you like.
Oh,
Ellie.
perfect. Great. Thank you.
Yeah,
Cool.
okay, Brian.
So the first one, I think you kind of half answered anyway.
Yeah.
Which is, do you mention colonial history when teaching francophonie?
Yes, we do. Yes. So we introduced it in quite well, in an age appropriate way, but we talk about why it is that certain countries speak French. In year 3, we spend quite a lot of time in Francophone Week talking about Carnival, and Carnival has a really clear link to the continent of Africa, and we make that really explicit to the children, and we talk through why that is the case, why it is that Carnival is celebrated in the Caribbean, for example. So yes, we do talk about it. We don't actually do units of work specifically on colonial history, but it is there being drip fed all the way through and spoken about all the time with the children. And when we talk about, Guadeloupe as, for example, as a French-speaking country that's still part of France, and then we look on Google Maps and talk about and ask the question, but why? And it's always asking that question, why, rather than just saying this is a French-speaking country, or a country where French is an official language, at least. Why is that the case? And talking to that with the children, talking about that with the children all the time.
Thank you, Ellie. And then another question says, how much French teaching do your children have per week?
So about 40 minutes a week. Yeah, I think it's up to 50 in year 6 or 45 or something, but in year 3, 40 minutes, and then it gets slightly longer as they go further up the school.
Thank you. So that's it for the questions. There were a couple of kind of comments along the way, just lots of positive things. Thank you very much. And just some other little sort of suggestions about places and things that are going on. For example, there's apparently BBC clip about Les Marchés in Guadeloupe.
Super, yeah.
So that's good. So yeah, a few things on there. And what kind of struck me, because there were a few ideas kind of being thrown around there, which is lovely to see, because obviously the people who are participating here can read those. Just along the lines of what we were talking about before we started today, Ellie, I'm just going to sort of just say, promote the Association for Language Learning a little bit locally. Depending on where you are, we definitely recommend getting involved with your local association, because it's a great opportunity. We run the Brighton Hub now, for example. Great opportunity to get together with other teachers who are teaching languages. Some of them are specialists, some of them are not, and you can share ideas. And like you said, Ellie, big things start with small beginnings, don't they?
They do indeed. We've got a couple more questions, Ellie, that have come in.
Perfect. Go ahead.
One of them is, do you teach languages into Key Stage in years 1 and 2?
No, we only teach languages in Key Stage 2. Reception year 1 and 2 don't do French, but what I think is really important is that they start to get an understanding of French, the French-speaking world, etc., before they come to us in Key Stage 2. So no, we don't teach French to them. But they do participate in things like our Francophone Art Week and our Semaine de la Francophonie, etc. So they are involved as well in that way.
Yeah, and another question that's come through to me as well is, with them setting up letter links, they're going to try and do that, but they're just worried about safeguarding issues. So how do you kind of because they're saying that when they were at school, they remembered getting a box in their lesson with lots of letters in, and the safeguarding wasn't an issue then because it just didn't exist. How do you go about that? If a box were to arrive with loads of letters, what would you do?
So in terms of information that can identify the children, we don't ever send pictures, for example, unless we've asked permission. And if we're doing video calls, we also inform the parents that they're doing a video call, and if they have an issue with that, then they have to contact the school, and we can make sure that child is out of shot, if you like. So we don't send pictures. When we're sending letters, it is very much hello, my name is. They might include something about their birthday, etc. But there isn't anything that I would say that would necessarily be able to identify them in terms of a picture and a photograph, should we say, a photograph and their information in a letter. So it's very much generic sort of stuff regarding I like playing football, I like eating pizza or whatever. So nothing that's because all of the letters obviously arrive to the school, so there's no sort of contact between the pupils in any other way than through the school.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think that's sorted. Yeah, any more questions on your side, Brian?
Yeah, we've got a couple more. So any recommendation of where to find resource ideas for a Spanish day? We celebrated 2 days based on Spain and flamenco, and this year will be based on salsa and Latin America.
Oh wow, that sounds amazing. Oh, I want to come to that day. That sounds fabulous. I would for Spanish teachers, I would recommend following Claire Seckham if you're not already on Twitter. And Claire also has a blog which is called Changing Phase Blogspot, which also has, I believe, information on it certainly about a Spanish cafe or something along those lines. And Lisa Stevens as well on Twitter. I think she is it Lissibo? I'm not sure. Hang on, let me just check my Twitter. She also has a blog, and that is really good for all things Spanish speaking. So those would be the 2 people that I would signpost you to, really. And I would also check out Susie Buell on Twitter and her website Polyglot Languages to see if there's anything on there as well. Yes, it's at Lissibo, Lissibo. She is a Spanish teacher in the West Midlands. So I think between those there will be lots of resources. And if you are not a member already of the Languages in Primary Schools Facebook group, the LIPS Facebook group, that is a really amazing space where you can access tons and tons and tons of resources and ideas and all those sorts of things for anything to do with language teaching. So all you'd need to do would be to type into the search bar Spanish day or something along those lines, and no doubt it would come back with lots and lots and lots of ideas and posts on there as well. So Languages in Primary Schools Facebook group, I definitely recommend.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think Susie's on this session tonight, so I'm sure she'll say hello.
Fabulous. There we go. So I flagged up Polyglot Languages, and Susie is somebody to follow for all things culture.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Another good question which has come through saying, do you set homework?
I don't set homework. No, that doesn't mean that children don't do homework. They sometimes bring in things, but no, I don't set homework for French.
It's an interesting one, isn't it, with languages for homework? But some of the things I saw when I was teaching primary, and particularly when I sort of moved around a couple of schools doing supply teaching things, one idea which I thought was really lovely for homework, and they did this for all Key Stage 2 classes, was they had a grid of activities for every term that they could choose from, and with that there would be 1 or 2 things that were linked in with languages. So kids then it's really well differentiated. You have some kids who just go way beyond and do like everything within the first 2 weeks, and then some children who just cherry pick the ones they really want to do.
Absolutely. And there are a lot of children that will come up to me and say, oh, I'm using Duolingo to learn French, or I'm learning Duolingo to learn Spanish. So they do have that interest, certainly, and I think the technology kind of interests them in that way as well. There is, that's just reminded me actually, there is also the Great Languages Challenge on the British Council website, which is a really nice grid that, like you've just mentioned, that's got lots and lots of different ideas for things that you can do to language related activities, if you like. One of them is find out which of your teachers can speak the most languages and things like that. So again, that might be something to interest children, engage children.
So I guess it's giving them the choice, isn't it, rather than prescribing?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, that's great. Well, that's the other thing too for those of you who are...
Sorry, Brian.
I was just going to say, those of you who are Language Nuts subscribers, where kids have their own individual logins, we do find the kids, do just go and play on the vocabulary games when they're at home. So that's just another little self-directed, self-motivated task. Go on, Elaine, you were going to fire one.
Yeah, and just to sort of jump on the back of that before I get this other question out here, Language Nut we are just about to launch our new primary guided course. For those of you that are Language Nut subscribers, we do have a course that we use at the moment, but the new one is going to be ready in the next 2 weeks, and there is an event on Eventbrite, which I'm sure Brian will put in the chat now, the link to the launch next Tuesday, which Fiona, who looks after primary at the moment, is going to be launching. Ellie, there's another question here. If you had to teach French in years 1 and 2, what kind of topics would you recommend to keep culture going? In other words, to have cultural topics in years 1 and 2. That's putting you a little bit on the spot there, isn't it?
I think that anything to do with food is really good. So anything that to bring in basic food items, croissant, all that sort of stuff. That's really good in terms of simple cultural things. That's a great question. Culture in years 1 and 2. I think you could. Let me have a think. Yeah, that's brilliant. I think you could also perhaps have a think about linking in with a particular country. I think that would make it really nice, because I think what you don't want to do in Key Stage 1 is sort of dot around too much all over the place, especially if you've only got a small amount of time. So potentially having a focus country, even if you don't have a link in that country, and thinking about, could you learn some, I don't know, let's think Mexico off the top of our heads. Could we learn some really simple songs that children in Mexico might learn, or whatever? So maybe thinking about those sort of songs and stories that could link in with a particular country, a particular French or Spanish speaking country, and thinking about how you could make your units of work then fit in with that, or just bringing in songs and stories and all that sort of stuff. Because I think sometimes in Key Stage 1, because I have taught French in Key Stage 1 before, you normally only have a very short amount of time, and the children's attention spans are quite short, so you want to kind of, as I said, not dot around too much all over the place. So I think I'd probably have a focus country, and then look at how I could pull out bits of culture, songs, stories, rhymes. I know in certain parts of South America they make sort of little worry dolls and things like that. Could you bring that in somehow? So that's probably what I would do. Just thinking off the top of my head. I'm sure I can probably come up with something better given time.
Yep, great. Thank you very much. If there are any more questions, I think we are.
We are at the end there. Yeah, no more questions come through. I will just share this comment, Ellie, because I think this is a lovely one. It's a nice one to finish on. Not a question, but just wanted to say thank you. So inspiring, and the children in your school are so lucky to have all this amazing cultural learning.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you for sharing that. That's really nice.
That's great. Well, on behalf of Language Nut, I'd like to say thank you very much to Ellie for giving up her time for preparing this session. And also, Ellie, if you wouldn't mind flipping to the last slide on your
absolutely.
Yeah, if you wanted to have a free trial with Language Nut, you're more than welcome to contact us on myself there at Language Nut, or Brian, who's been on tonight. It's just brian@languagenut.com, and also Daniel, who works behind our scenes as well, who's not with us tonight, but he often gets people contacting him for an actual trial. And if you want to attend our session next Tuesday, Brian's put the link in the chat there, I think. Yep, there it is, to our primary course launch next week. And if you've enjoyed tonight's session, please give us a shout out on social media. And also, I'm sure what's your Twitter handle, Ellie?
It's @ECCMFL.
I think it's on one of your slides, isn't it?
No, did I put it on the first one? I can't remember.
Oh, I can't remember. I think you did. I think it's on the first one.
I'll go back and see if it's there. Sorry about this, everybody.
No, don't worry. There it is. Yeah, ECC.
Yes, there it is. Got it. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Elaine.
Lovely. And also, all our webinars are free. You don't have to subscribe to Language Nut. but hopefully if you go onto our website, you can see we've had at least 20 to 25 over the last sort of year and a half now of blogs, of webinars. And I know Ellie did a fantastic one for us last year on surviving an Ofsted deep dive into languages, and that's been watched over 1,012, I think 1,200 times. It's had a lot of downloads, so good. So thank you very much, Ellie, and
Thank you.
hope everyone enjoys the rest of the evening and has a good remaining a few weeks left of the summer term. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank
Thank
you, everyone.
you.